welcome to the Remembering Akron podcast. I'm your host, Derek Maxfield, and today my guest is William Asmus. Welcome, William.
Welcome.
And I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate being here.
So you were born just a few years after World War II in Buffalo in 1949. Did anybody in your family affected by World War II serve?
Not directly in the military, but my dad was a welder, and he worked at the Brooklyn Navy Yard during the war, first couple of years of the war as a master welder at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And one of his jobs was laying the keel for the battleship Missouri.
Really?
Yeah. He used to talk about that. They had special procedure they had to do. Welding was primitive back then as compared to today, but he said on the sections of the keel, there was a manufactured part where you'd start your arc out here and get it warmed and hot and run through the splice. And you couldn't stop. If you lost your arc and you had to start over again, you had to stop. They would get a grinder in there and grind that whole weld back out of there, and you would start all over again from the piece that was off the part.
Wow. And
then eventually that piece that was off the part where you started your arc would be machined off. But they wanted pure weld going through there without any seams or an overlap of weld. It was just how that was a requirement. And they would have transits down there, and you would weld on one side or the other side, and they were always telling them where they could weld, because welding is destructive, and it constricts the metal, and it's bending all the time you're welding. And of course, you want it straight when you get it done. So.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So since we've been talking about your father, tell me a little bit about him.
He had a very interesting life. He was born in Corfu in 1911. He grew up in Corfu, but he left home early. He actually ran away from home. I don't think he got along with his dad real well.
Oh, really?
And he was big. He was a big man. And I think he was 16 when he ran away from home. And the way he did it, he hitchhiked into Buffalo and got on a freight train. And he would go out west. And he did this a couple times. The first time he was actually underage. But he would go, he told me he would go to, he'd get on a train and go someplace. He'd go to a library and read the trade magazines and see where the money was sent out for building dams or whatever, bridges. And then he would find a way to get there. So he ended up in Bagnell, Missouri, working on a Bagnell Dam in the Ozarks.
Really?
For one summer. And he used to go out to the Midwest and hook up with the threshing crews, during the wheat season.
Yeah.
And he ended up out in the state of Washington, picking apples out there, Skycomish, Washington. He was down in Death Valley putting up telephone poles. Maybe they're telegraph poles, I'm not sure. This is around early 1920s. And they found out how old he was, and they fired him because he was underage. No. And, he had some great stories. I got a map of the United States at home. And before he passed away, I made him put tacks into every place he's been, and that thing looks like it was shot with a shotgun.
Wow.
All over the country.
Well, that's really an independent spirit, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We wouldn't have called him a hobo, but because he was going for work, what I mean?
Right.
But he wasn't paying for his transportation either.
That's a real go-getter.
He told me one time, I think it was in Rotan, Texas, he fell asleep on top of a boxcar. And he got up in the middle of the night, and he had to go to the bathroom, and he forgot where he was, and he stepped right off that boxcar.
Oh, my God.
He fell between the tracks, so he said they had to take him in town to get a doctor and get the cinders out of his face. Otherwise, it could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse.
He landed on a rail, yeah.
But he did eventually settle down, apparently.
Yes, he met my mom in Buffalo, and they got married in 1937, and they raised 7 kids.
Wow. Tell me about your mom.
My mom was a city girl, and when she married my dad, he saw her in church. That's how they met in Buffalo. When she married my dad ended up, went down to New York City with him. My 2 oldest sisters were born before the war, or during the war, 39 and 40. And while he was working at Brooklyn Navy Yard. So they were living down in New York City then. And then my grandfather, who owned the farm here in Akron, told my dad he was going to sell the place because he was getting older, and he just didn't want the farm. The farm was on Lewis Road in Akron right now. So my dad quit the job in the Brooklyn Navy Yard and came up because he didn't want to lose that farm. He wanted that farm in the family. So that's where I was born, and that's where I was raised there. So I had 4 older sisters and 2 younger brothers. It was 7 of us. And my grandfather lived with us for a while there, too.
Hey.
So there was 10 of us there in that house at one time.
Okay. That's quite a few people.
It is quite a few people.
I hope there was more than one bathroom.
There was not.
Oh, no.
And not when we were young. Later on, it was funny, after the girls grew up and got married and moved out, my dad added a bathroom upstairs, and they always...
After the girls are gone. Oh, that's not a good strategy. It's before the girls leave that you need it. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful.
But my mom became a country girl then, and she embraced it. And
all right.
The little farm was maybe 24 acres. Was right on the banks of Murda Creek there, right on the Akron village line.
All right. So you grew up in Akron, graduated from Akron High School.
Yep.
Do you have any fond memories of high school?
I do, playing football for him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We were undefeated for 2 years, 1965 and 66, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
the small schools division.
Yeah, it was actually back then it was an Niagara Orleans League. So we would play Medina, Roy Hart, in this area.
Undefeated for 2 years.
For 2 years, yeah.
That's pretty remarkable. So what position did you...
I played offensive tackle. We usually went strong left, so I was the weak side tackle.
All right. That's an interesting story. So what did you do after you graduated high school?
Well, I got married right away.
Did you?
Yes. My first marriage, and we had 2 kids, 9 years apart. But I more or less drifted through the Rust Belt. I started working at AMAX. We were making zirconium tubing for nuclear reactors, half-inch diameter for power plants, generating power plants, quarter-inch diameter for nuclear subs. But the bottom fell out of that business soon, and I was looking for a job. And I remember Steve Kasuth and I were working there. Steve was, I think...
I interviewed him already.
Yeah. He had just
colorful guy.
He had just come back out of Vietnam. He had been wounded over there. And he was limping a little bit, but he's getting along good. So we're both working at AMAX, and we're saying, well, this place doesn't look good. The writing's on the wall, and they weren't paying. We can get more if we go to Harrison Radiator. So we both went down there and applied at Harrison Radiator. I got hired, and Steve didn't.
Oh, no.
But Steve got a job at the post office, and I got laid off after 3 months at Harrison Radiator.
Oh.
So from Harrison Radiator, I went to National Gyp over on Roll Road.
Okay.
And from there, I went to Strip It in Akron. And in between, I worked at the Akron National down here on Wright Road.
All right.
For a year or so. Part-time work at Perry's Dairy, loading ice cream trucks. A little bit working for Joe Leiter, part-time out on at the junkyard there on Jackson Street. And then I got the job I retired from. I got a job at Keller Technology in Tonawanda, and I worked as a machinist there until I retired.
Okay. So
been retired 8 years now.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So you were commuting to Tonawanda for a little while.
I was, yeah.
All right. And did you enjoy that?
No, not at all.
No? Just, it was there to make you some money.
Yeah. Especially, most of the time we worked 10 hours there, so we had to start at 6 in the morning.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty hard to get on, especially when the roads aren't quite right.
Yeah, I wouldn't miss that part at all.
Yeah.
And you have 2 children?
I do, from my first marriage, yep.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about them.
There, as a matter of fact, my daughter, Joanne, lives in Clarence. She has 4 kids, the oldest, 26, the youngest, 16. And they're currently on vacation right now at the Thousand Islands, and I worry about them because they got a big boat. A lot of times they have accidents with it.
Uh-huh.
And my son, John, is married, has 2 daughters, 16 and 13, and he lives in the house that I grew up in. He bought the house from my father's estate after he passed away.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's nice.
And I only live 2 miles down the road myself, so it's like I never really left home. It's always nice to go back.
All right. But you keep busy, even though you've retired, I understand.
I do.
You have some hobbies?
Being a machinist, I have a shop, and I have some machine metalworking tools in the shop. So and one of my biggest hobbies is the Antique Gas and Steam Association member. We do a lot of restoring of old engines and that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that must be interesting.
It's very interesting. As a matter of fact, this led to a project a couple of years ago. I think it was 2014. My son John and his family were down in Canandaigua Lake renting a cottage down there. It's the 3rd year they were there. And my daughter told my son, Dad, come out here. There's a steam engine down in the water here. So he went out there and got the goggles on. It was about 10 foot of water. And there's this old hit-and-miss engine anchoring the swim platform that the kids are diving off of. Just off, probably maybe not even 100 yards off the shore. Somebody had used an old hit-and-miss engine for an anchor. Well, John, being like me, a big hobby, talked to the owner. He was an Akron resident, too. It was Steve Kratz owned that cottage. He lives in Skinny Atlas, but his mother, Helen Kratz, lived many years on Hart Street up here. And John asked him the story behind it. Yeah, he said, years ago I bought this place, and that was in the barn, and one thing led to another, and, we needed something heavy to anchor this steel. They would unhook the draft in the wintertime, but the anchor stayed right there. You follow me? They would just put a buoy on the anchor.
I see.
And he said we built a special platform on a boat, and we put it out where we thought we'd want the anchor, and we threw it overboard. And that was 42 years ago. So make a long story short, John bought it off of him and went back after the season ended in the fall with a bunch of help and pulled that engine out of there with a cable and a winch and stuff like that. And he replaced the anchor with a more suitable anchor, like a hunk of concrete. And we got that thing home, and with just out of curiosity and just to say, was it possible, we started taking it apart and started coming apart. Make a long story short, that engine is running right now down at the Pike Fair.
Is it really?
Yes. It's a 1912 Sparta engine. It's a igniter. It didn't have a spark plug. It had an igniter. There was a couple of parts we had to get donor. The connecting rod was so far rusted that we had to get a donor from a parts engine, that we luckily found on the internet. It uses the same piston that was in there. It's got new rings on it. But what I had to do was after everything was seized up, after I got the piston out of it, I had to bore out and order a sleeve online to replace the bore in it. So an 1/8-inch cast iron sleeve, I bored it out and got it right back up to its original 4-inch piston. And two rings on it. The bearings were still good on it. Still got the original bearings on it. It was surprising. It must have been a freshwater, 10 foot of water. It had been underwater for 42 years. We even took pictures of it. It was in a trade magazine, a gas engine magazine in 2014. There's pictures of it underwater with all the seaweed on it,
That's a remarkable story.
We had a lot of fun with it, and it was a family effort. My granddaughter saw it and knew enough about engines that her father would be interested. Her father was interested, bought the engine. I think he paid $75 for it. It's just scrap price. And then he got me interested in it. So there's 3 generations that were interested in that engine. And he just sent me a picture the other day, a video. He's big in the Pike Fair, the Wyoming County Fair.
Yeah.
And he runs the antique displays down there. And the Sparta's been running the last 3 or 4 years. We take it to a lot of shows. Yeah.
That is really cool.
We had a lot of fun with it. That was a lot of fun.
So you're generally interested in history in any case.
I am.
You're interested in you work with the Newstead Historical Society.
Yes, I do. Yep.
And you got some great family stories going back. I understand that you had a great grandfather that served in the Civil War.
I did. And I didn't know this, but about the age of 10 was the 100-year anniversary of the war, and everything was Civil War, box tops, you could send away Centennial soldiers. So I got interested in the Civil War. And then my mom informed me, you had a relative in the war. And, well, okay, this has really piqued my interest, So he's kind of been my hero all my life, Philip Asmus, And there was some letters that he wrote home, just copies of them that were printed in the Washington Tribune in 1923, sent in by his wife. Caroline. And that's the only record I got of his experiences during the war. But they were quite compelling. He was in the 8th New York Cavalry, Company C. I got his discharge papers home. The 8th New York Cavalry always found themselves in a hot spot. No matter they would change divisions, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, wherever they would end up, things got a little heated. So on the back of his discharge papers, he has 62 battles and skirmishes listed on him.
Wow.
All in shorthand. Yeah. 62 battles and skirmishes. He served 3 years, and then he re-upped at the end of the war because they wanted to keep the veterans around. They knew it was coming to a close. And he was there at Appomattox.
He was at Appomattox?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Some of his exploits during the Antietam campaign, he was captured by Stonewall Jackson's army coming up at Harper's Ferry.
Really?
The Benjamin Davis, the commander of the 8th New York, got the 8th Cavalry out in the middle of the night one night. A famous escape story, because it was not, you couldn't defend. It was indefensible. The Harper's Ferry it was like shooting into a bull.
Right.
And they were outnumbered. There was only 5,000 garrison there. But he was left behind because he was running dispatches for the army. So he got captured. And one of those letters, he cried when he had to give up his horse to the rebels. But early in the war, they were exchanged. So a couple months later, he's back in his unit again.
All right.
So he missed the Battle of Antietam, but he was back in the unit again. And then he was captured again momentarily. He was on the Wilson Railroad raid. They almost got down into North Carolina. They just went down and behind enemy lines and raised havoc with the cavalry. And they got caught down there, and they had to fight their way out. And not only did they have to fight their way out, but they had to burn their wagons and pretty much leave their wounded behind, too.
Oh, no.
And he talks about a hard time. We didn't sleep for 3 days, and, cold and damp, and a lot of skirmishes, a lot of fights. But he got captured, too, at... They got out of that. I'm trying to remember all the letters, but in the Shenandoah Valley, one morning they got attacked like 3 o'clock in the morning. I think this was Lacey Springs, and he talks about they were up already. They were supposed to get going early, but they got attacked and they were blindsided. And everybody, it was middle of the night, everybody shooting, and he tried to bridle his horse, but she got wild, and he let her go, and he got captured by 2 Confederates. And they told him to get on this horse and come with me. And he noticed there was a sword in the saddle of the horse that they didn't know. So he says, I'm going to try to get out of this. So he pulls the sword out and he runs after the one guy. I think he knocks him off, but the other guy gets a drop on him and hits him in the hand. Actually cuts his hand. He has to drop the sword. And he wrote this right in the letter. Then the guy told him to dismount. He's got a gun on him now. He got a carbine on him. And he took his boots off. They took his watch. They took all his money. And he raised the gun to shoot him. And Philip wrote this. He said, I just decidedly yelled no. And apparently that rebel didn't have the gumption to shoot somebody face to face. He said, well, follow me. So he doesn't have any socks on. It's like miserable weather at this time, too. And he's walking behind him, and there's firefights going on all over. He calls over to a couple guys he sees with Union jackets on. And then he sees their butternut pants. He says they had stripped a couple of dead Yankees, And so they laughed at him. So he's walking behind this guy. Now things are getting hotter and hotter. People don't even know where it's going. He said, all I did is I hid behind a tree, and they weren't coming back for me. They just took off, too. They were getting worried, you know what I mean? And he finally made his way back to his unit, but he damn near froze to death.
Wow.
There was actually freezing rain, he said, but he's out there with no jacket, no not even any boots. So that was a close call for him, too. But at that time, and he knew it, he would do anything to escape because they already had known of Andersonville.
Yes.
And they would do anything to escape at that time because they didn't have many options after that. Yeah.
Right.
But City Point, I think it's Hopewell now, around Petersburg. He's standing on a wharf there. A ship blows up. He says he gets knocked down by the concussion. He gets back up and he gets knocked down. Him and his horse both get knocked down by the falling timber. It could have been a Confederate bomb and hidden in the coal, but the whole boiler blew up in that ship. So he's been wounded 2 or 3 times during the war.
But he survived.
He survived the war. He did survive the war. He ended up living on Two Rod Road in Marilla. The house is still there.
Wow.
There's still I got a picture of that house in 1888, and the 3 maple trees in that 1888 picture are still in the driveway.
Wow.
It's really neat to go by and see the place.
And where is he buried?
He's buried in Marilla Cemetery. Yep. And he's buried right next to another cavalry soldier from Michigan, like 1 row over.
Really?
I wonder if they knew each other. Yeah.
Interesting.
He did not live a long life. He ran like a nursery there, plants and trees. Mm-hmm. He had like 24 acres right off of Clinton Street. But he dropped dead in the driveway at the age of 49.
Wow.
And his wife, Caroline, who ended up living to be 99, said that he never really recovered from the experiences of his war.
Well, all the exposure.
Exposure,
right?
yeah.
Wounds.
And I actually have an article from the Marilla Newstead, the Marilla Historical Society, for her pension, claiming that, and I don't know, there's nothing in his letters that explain this, but it says in this official document that he was shot through the liver. So I don't know the circumstances around that wound.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So you have his pension file, you have his military record.
Yes, I have his discharge papers. Yeah,
That is really
both sets
awesome.
of discharge papers.
You don't have any artifacts?
I have his sword.
You have his sword?
I have his sword. It's pristine condition.
Really?
Government issue,
Now that's really awesome. Now, how did that come into your possession?
It was handed down to my father, and my father passed it on to me. I'm the oldest boy. Actually, I'm the only. I've always had a Civil War fever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was the obvious one to get it. So
That is awesome that you still have that.
Yeah.
That's a cool story. So you also have some interesting recollections from your own lifetime. The blizzard of 77, something
I do.
that I identify with, too.
Yes, yeah, and we all remember where we were.
That's
that
right.
Time. Yep.
Well, where were you?
I was home. On that Friday, and this is the way I remember it. I might be, with the facts, it might not be perfect. Maybe it wasn't a Friday. But anyways, I'm home. I'm working second shift at National Gypsum Company. And it had been a nasty winter up till that point. We had a blow just a day or two before that, and we had quite a bit of snow up to that point. And the snow was so deep, my dad had an Alice Chalmers with a plow on it, but I couldn't use that anymore. He just lived 800 yards down the road. So I had to go down and get the Ford 8N tractor with a front end loader because I had to dig out my driveway again. And I couldn't push it anymore. I had to pick it up and dump it. That's how deep the snow was. And I noticed when I was out there, this was before lunch, that the wind was maybe 10, 15 miles an hour from the east because you could see it, wisping over that bank. And I got it done with the driveway, and I parked it in the driveway, went in and ate lunch. I might have been in there an hour. I'm thinking about going to work at 3. So I said, I'm going to run the tractor back. So I get back in the tractor, start it up, and I look down the driveway, and son of a gun, 180 degrees that wind has turned, and now it's wisping, not strong, but coming right out of the west. But I thought, boy, that's odd. Just an hour ago it was coming out of the east, now it's coming out of the west. And it's getting dark. I mean, it looks like the end of the world's coming. Holy mackerel, it's getting dark. This is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I go get out on the road, on Lewis Road, and start heading for my dad's place, and then this wall of snow hit. It was just like a whiteout. I couldn't even see if there was any cars coming to pull in his driveway. I had to go get him to look for traffic so I could just cross the road into his driveway. That's how hard it was snowing at the time. But it didn't last long. The snow didn't last long. I think we only got 7 inches there. But the wind kept cranking up and cranking up and cranking up. And it was like 60-mile-an-hour sustained winds after that all night long that I remember. So obviously, I didn't go into work that day. I'm glad I didn't. But the Jip plant on Roll Road in Clarence Center was closed for the whole week while everybody was digging out. But I had a job with my father, who was a welder, and we were called out, and with this big portable rig, he had a big Hobart 350-amp welder, and we were thawing water lines out all through the village of Akron.
Wow.
So that was my job for the rest of the week, and that's back-breaking work. It's the big, heavy double-aught welding cables you got to drag around. And you got to go into the house and open up you can't put the clamp on outside the meter. You got to be inside the meter. You usually have to shine the pipe up so you get a good connection. It's almost like jump starting a car. You have to put the big cables on there. And now you got to find a dead short. So the village always made us cook from the curb cock to the house. And the reason, and we always told them it's a waste of time. It's never froze there. But they would make us do it there. And if we got water, then it was the homeowner's responsibility. So we'd cook from the curb cock to the meter, and of course we wouldn't get anything because we knew it wasn't froze there because there's snow on the ground. It's always froze under the road. So then, okay, we spent a half an hour on that. So now we got to find a hydrant somewhere on the other side of the road, file the paint off it so you get a good connection, come back, hit the welder, see if you get a short. The welder will kick in if it's a dead short. If for some reason it isn't a dead short, it won't do anything. But as soon as you hit the switch, you'll hear the governor kick in and she'll start roaring. So if we get a good connection, the governor kicks in, and somebody's got to be downstairs. Within 5-6 minutes, you'll get water. And what happens is the outside of the pipe starts to warm up from the DC current. I think we use high voltage, low amps. You want to stay away from sparking. Sparking, bad things, causes holes in pipes. But as soon as you got the water heated up on the outside, then the water would start melting itself down.
I see.
5-10 minutes most, you'll get water.
Well, you had plenty to do, at least, during this blizzard,
We worked all week, yeah.
Wow. That is really tough stuff. So let me ask you the hardest question last.
Okay.
So you have some grandchildren?
Yes. Yep.
So imagine a generation from now, one of your grandchildren are talking to their children about you. What would you hope they would say?
Oh, boy, that is a tough question. I hope they would say, I would say the same thing about me as I would say about my dad. That they respected me and they loved me.
That's a good answer. Well, on that note, thank you, Bill. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening in, and remember to tune in to the next episode of Remembering Akron.